news is breaking on North Korea, and I'm going to read it to you off my phone in stages right now. Jennifer Griffin, our correspondent on it, says that Pentagon officials say they are checking on reports that North Korea has just fired a ballistic missile. If this is an ICBM like the two launched in July, the Pentagon would make a statement. If it is anything less than that, the comment will come from the U.S. Pacific Command in Hawaii, so we are waiting to see that. Don't want to say that this is happening in a vacuum today, because there are other things that are going on with regard to North Korea as being reported today. According to Reuters, North Korea may announce the completion of its nuclear program within a year. South Korea's unification minister said this earlier today. That isolated nation is moving more fast, or I should say, more quickly than expected in developing its weapons arsenal. Again, that's from the South Korea's unification minister today. That would be a big deal. That would speed up a timeline that we know President Trump and other diplomats in our nation are working on right now.
You know, I was surprised that they launched at this time. I thought that they were deep into preparations for the military's winter training cycle. So I thought that we would not see a missile launch until February. But, you know, in terms of the improvements in range, we shouldn't be surprised. We know that they're making constant improvements, whether they test or not. And so the United States has an obligation right now to do its best to make sure that North Korea doesn't have the money for missile launches or detonation of nukes. Yeah. And we can do that.
President, Senator, Speaker, a little over 2.5 hours ago, North Korea launched an intercontinental ballistic missile. It went higher, frankly, than any previous shot they've taken. It's a research and development effort on their part to continue building ballistic missiles that could threaten everywhere in the world, basically. And in response, the South Koreans have fired some pinpoint missiles out into the water to make certain North Korea understands that they could be taken under fire by our ally. But the bottom line is it's a continued effort to build a threat, a ballistic missile threat that endangers world peace, regional peace, and certainly the United States.
Before I take your questions, I'd like to say just a word about the framework with North Korea that Ambassador Gallucci signed this morning. This is a good deal for the United States. North Korea will freeze and then dismantle its nuclear program. South Korea and our other allies will be better protected. The entire world will be safer as we slow the spread of nuclear weapons. South Korea, with support from Japan and other nations, will bear most of the cost of providing North Korea with fuel to make up for the nuclear energy it is losing. And they will pay for an alternative power system for North Korea that will allow them to produce electricity while making it much harder for them to produce nuclear weapons. The United States and international inspectors will carefully monitor North Korea to make sure it keeps its commitments. Only as it does so will North Korea fully join the community of nations.
And here's the downside to this rush to sort of military confrontation. We do not know where all of the weapons are in North Korea. We don't know. That's been in the public domain. That is not classified information. So if we did attack and there was fire and fury, most people understand that within 24 hours you'd have about 1 million people dead. You have massive artillery batteries all around Korea, which would be firing at each other. Seoul is only 40 miles from the DMZ. So you would have an outcome which, number one, doesn't get rid of all the weapons and winds up most assuredly initiating a very prolonged crisis with respect to the nature of the conflict which would unfold.
One is North Korea, and you say that you, as president, would be willing to launch a preemptive strike against North Korea's nuclear capability.
First, I'd negotiate. I would negotiate like crazy, and I'd make sure that we tried to get the best deal possible. But look, Tim, if a man walks up to you on a street in Washington, because this doesn't happen, of course, in New York, but if a man walks up and puts a gun to your head and says, give me your money, wouldn't you rather know where he's coming from before he had the gun in his hand? And these people, in 3 or 4 years, are going to be having nuclear weapons. They're going to have those weapons pointed all over the world, and specifically at the United States. And wouldn't you be better off solving this really potentially unbelievable, and the biggest problem, I mean, we can talk about the economy, we can talk about Social Security. The biggest problem this world has is nuclear proliferation. And we have a country out there, North Korea, which is sort of wacko, which is not a bunch of dummies, and they are going out and they are developing nuclear weapons. And they're not doing it because they're having fun doing it. They're doing it for a reason. And wouldn't it be good to sit down and really negotiate something, and ideally negotiate? Now, if that negotiation doesn't work, you better solve the problem now than solve it later, Tim. And you know it, and every politician knows it, and nobody wants to talk about it. Jimmy Carter, who I really like, and he went over there. It was so soft. These people are laughing at us.
The former general of the Air Force, Merrill McPeak, the former Secretary of Defense, Les Aspin, said you could not launch a preemptive strike against North Korea because the nuclear fallout could be devastating to the Asian Peninsula.
I'm not talking about us using nuclear weapons. I'm saying that they have areas where they're developing missiles.
No, but taking out their nuclear potential would create a fallout.
Tim, do you know that this country went out and gave them nuclear reactors, free fuel for 10 years? We virtually tried to bribe them into stopping, and they're continuing to do what they're doing, and they're laughing at us. They think we're a bunch of dummies. I'm saying that we have to do something to stop.
But if the military told you, Mr. Trump, we can't do this.
You give me two names. You're giving me two names. I don't know. Do you want to do it in 5 years when they have warheads all over the place, every one of them pointing to New York City, to Washington, and every one of our... Is that when you want to do it? Or do you want to do something now?